All right, sophomores, we are recording. So our lecture, it's a short one, is on the fall of the Moche. You may write that down. The reasons I put up here, you will write them as I talk about them. And I will be giving you more lectures throughout the year. The pictures there are obviously just to kind of show you some symbols of what we are talking about. So let's talk about the Moche. The Moche were in classical era civilization living in western Peru in South America. As you saw from the reading and the video, they built pyramids, they had irrigation, they were able to farm and build a large civilization. Their pyramids can still be found today. Let me give you some information on their climate real quick. This part of Peru, even though it's next to the ocean, is technically a desert. Same with many parts of Ecuador. It's a desert. Because of the wind currents that come off the Pacific Ocean, the way the wind comes in, it gets almost no rain. So how could the Moche live there if they had almost no rain? How could they farm? The reason why these civilizations are able to live is because we have the Andes Mountains, which we can see right here. So the Andes Mountains are very high mountains. And what do you get on the top of very high mountains? Snow, ice, and glaciers. So, how do the Moche get their water? From the snow that melts and becomes water in rivers. We can see there's rivers through here. If you didn't know this, most rivers start in mountains. And they start from the glaciers, or all the melt that collects from the mountains. That's how many, many rivers start. And these rivers flow down. There's even underwater streams. And this provided water for the Moche. You see why irrigation was a big deal? Them moving this water around for their crops. And they were able to farm then and make it as a civilization. So that's kind of how a little bit on how the Moche are able to rise with their environment. Then the environment changes. There are some environmental changes that happen. First off, we have this thing called El Nino. We'll talk about this El Nino. In the year 560 CE or 560 AD, remember, CE, AD mean the same thing, after the year 0. So we're near the end of the classical era. In the year 560 CE, AD, around there, we had an El Nino. El Nino is a different weather pattern. Instead of being almost no rain, there was suddenly a ton of rain that came. Flooding that came. Also, then what we had happen was there was a drought. And not only a drought here because of the desert climate, so that wouldn't be that odd, but there was also a drought in the mountains. So there wasn't as much water. So all of a sudden you had a ton of water and then none. The rain from this El Nino lasted for about 30 years. The drought lasted for about 30 years, which is a crazy amount of time for a rainy season and a drought.
So it's 30 years for each.
30 years for each. is what what the archaeologists have been able to discover. Now, we are giving our best estimates on that one. This would be hard for a modern civilization to make it through that. Extremely difficult for a civilization in the classical era. Now that might be enough to end the civilization right there, or make them move, or go somewhere else, or abandon the cities they had. But also, what some archaeologists have found is that there's evidence of warfare. There's evidence of warfare. The leaders of the Moche were seen as like gods, or at least that they could communicate. Not like gods, they could communicate with the gods. The leaders of the Moche had the ability to communicate with gods, and they were able to affect the weather that came. So what happened to a lot of the people's belief in these leaders after this rain and drought? Yeah, they were seen as not doing their job. There was a civil war, and there was a big fight for resources, because after flooding, drought, were there a lot of resources for the people? No. This led to civil war, which led to, again, the downfall of the Moche civilization. Now again, do we know this for 100% for certain? No, these are the theories that we have now, and this is some of the best evidence we have. But we can see through a combination of environmental disasters and civil war that the Moche fell. Now I put the word fortresses up there. What we found what has been found after the drought and El Nino has been that there were fortresses built instead of pyramids. Fortresses are defensive walls. So it's the people of the Moche went from building pyramids, went from building their cities to building defensive walls for war. And there's not evidence of an outside group coming in, so the best evidence says that it was a civil war or a war within the Moche. They were fighting against themselves, maybe two different groups. Does that make sense? All right, and I'll stop the video right there.